You find me in my natural state, a bunch of books in my hand. Before I introduce the panel, I just want to give a quick thank you to Lady Liberty in her Tiffany dress, or Tiffany outfit, and Tina for your big heart. PragerU loves you guys. We love all of you, your mama bears, and we love working with you. And so I just want to say it is a very, very special moment for me and my team to be here. I'm going to introduce our panel, and we're going to do something a little different from what we planned because of the news that we received yesterday about the 6 hostages that were massacred. And so I'd like to just take one moment to recognize this evil time in humanity. So team, please come up. We have Danielle, Sabrina, and Shabbos. And we're going to light 6 candles. Many of you, I'm sure, have been following what has happened since October 7th. These 6 kids survived up until 3 days ago. And their bodies were found in Rafah. Remember the all eyes on Rafah? Remember when the Israelis were not allowed to go in there to extract these beautiful, precious lives? One of them, Hirsch Goldberg, an American kid from California, where I'm from. So it's a very, very hard moment for many of us. It's a hard moment for me. I spent many years living in Israel. But I'm also so unbelievably grateful to be with family, to be here with family, and to not experience this morning alone, but hugged by people who love us and who realize the evil that humanity is facing right now. So, friends, let's light these 6 candles. Maybe you can take one of those. Ooh, this. Shabbos does this every Shabbos. Well, most Jews do. We light these candles. There it is. Baruch Dayan Emet. Thank you. So, just like in Israel, we go from pain and sorrow to strength and happiness. And I want to encourage you to do that because despair is a sin. And when we fight evil, we have to have strength and we have to find purpose in what we do. And so I just want everybody chin up, okay? Please. Hi guys. Put a smile on your face and chin up. We're gonna fight this. So I want to start by just having you explain who you are and what colleges you're from, and how has your lives changed on campus since October 7th? Why don't we start with Danielle?
Absolutely. It's wonderful to see so many faces here. It's really incredible. My name is Danielle Shapiro, and on Tuesday, I am beginning my senior year at Princeton University, where I study in the politics department. And And in terms of how my life has changed since October 7th, I mean, the short answer is it's changed in every way. I think every generation has their event, their moment that changes the way they look at the world, changes the way they look at their fellow citizens, and changes how they act. And I think for our generation, especially the Jewish community, especially Jewish Americans who were on campuses this past year, that is October 7th. I think everyone I know has that 9/11 story where they remember exactly where they were. So in the short sense, I have had to become an activist, which is a word I did not associate with before October 7th. And in a practical sense, I've had to take time away from my academics so that I can fight what I really truly believe is the good fight.
Thank you, Danielle.
Sabrina.
Hi, everybody. Once again, thank you so much for being here. And just in line with the theme, the blessings of liberty, I just want to open by saying that liberty is not a license to do whatever you want, but it's the responsibility to act with the right thing to do. We're all here because we believe that we have the duty to do the right thing, and that's exactly what the three of us and our fellow Jewish students and our allies have done since October 7th. As for me personally, my journey with campus anti-Semitism started the day that I arrived in college. I am an American Israeli dual citizen, and I did not know that anti-Israel sentiment existed on campus. So upon introducing myself to my fellow peers in the classroom, I was labeled with colonialist, racist, imperialist, right-wing extremist, you name it. That was my label, and I questioned this. And I actually, instead of just complaining and crying victimhood, I decided to turn my academic study into a study on these ideologies that have contributed to the rise of anti-Semitism. So this has been the silver lining in all of it. And since October 7th, I've not only deepened my academic study of this ideology, but I've also come to embody the Israeli spirit of strength and resilience and never backing down and continuing to fight with my community for what is right.
Sure. Hi. Good morning, everyone. To lighten the mood, I first want to say I know the SPLC labeled you guys as domestic terrorists, so I emailed my mom this morning, and I said, I've never met such nice, kind-hearted, God-fearing domestic terrorists. I mean, you guys are amazing. So, so really, thank you for having us. And in fact, by having us, you've actually done more than Harvard and Columbia and really any of the institutions of higher learning ever did, which is simply listening to their students. It's something that we have been unable to do because they are unwilling to do the right thing. So look, October 7th was not just the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. October 7th was a direct attack on the United States. 45 American citizens were killed. Not only that, but as was mentioned, one of the hostages who were executed in cold blood was Hirsch Goldberg Poland, an American citizen from California. There are still 7 American citizens being held in the terror tunnels in Gaza. And I don't want to get too political, but the idea that simply just saying ceasefire is like Beetlejuice and it will just appear it's so hurtful, not just to the Jewish community, but to the American people when we have one of our own who are stuck in Gaza. I digress. What we witnessed after October 7th really underscores what your uncle actually says, which is we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization that throws gay people off of roofs. We know that's what they're capable of doing. But when you have the progressive elites, those who are supposed to be the moral barometers, those who are our ethical compasses, celebrating and championing the cause of terrorist organizations, saying that they stand with the resistance. You know, every time I planted an American flag at Harvard University the last 10 months, every single time it was ripped down, thrown across campus, or vandalized. They replaced the American flag at Harvard University with the flag of Palestine. It's not just a Jewish issue. This is not an attack of anti-Semitism. It's an attack on our democratic American values. And that's why it's so important that we as moms, as dads, as brothers and sisters, each and every one of us, do all that we can in our own capacity to stand up and fight back.
I want to share with you a story of a 13-year-old girl who was born in the United States and traveled to Israel, lived in Israel for a while. She tells the story of how she visited the Holocaust Museum. And as she walked through Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, she saw all the evil. She saw the baby shoes, the hairbrushes, the images of the emaciated people. She walked through the entire exhibit, and as you'd imagine, a 13-year-old could not utter a word. It is so overwhelming to watch evil, such darkness in humanity. She reaches the door at the end of the exhibit where there's a little light and a docent. And the girl asks this docent, how could this happen? How come nobody stopped this evil on planet Earth? Why didn't people fight back? And the docent, who probably answered this same question to the thousands of people who visited this Holocaust museum, looked back at the young girl and said, young girl, Most people rely on others to do the fighting for them. Most people don't start fighting until it is too late. That young girl was me. That was me. That was the moment that lit a fire in my belly, where later on, when I came back to the United States, I didn't ask who can do a better job than me at fighting. I didn't ask who has a more convenient position to fight. I just took one step after another step and figured out what God's gifts are that I could utilize. These are his gifts that I can utilize to fight against evil. When I watch what you are doing, when I watch what you are doing, I mean, thank you. You're so young, right? You're supposed to enjoy your college years, but you've become fighters. Shabbos, you're suing an Ivy League school. You're suing Harvard.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the things that you're doing require monumental courage, which, by the way, is a deficit in America right now. How many parents do I know that don't have the courage that you guys have? And so my question to you, Danielle, where do you get your courage from?
Absolutely. So I think my beginning at Princeton was an interesting case. I was supposed to start Princeton in the fall of 2020. I don't know if anyone remembers the Ivy League COVID policies. That comes right below their Ivy League Jew policies, I would say, in terms of quality. So I didn't want to start Princeton completely remotely, so I ended up deferring again. I spent another gap year in Israel, which is a great year. But as a result, I came into college 2 years older than the vast majority of my peers. And I think the first thing is, when you're a little bit older, you have a little bit more perspective, and I simply don't covet what my peers covet in the vast majority of circumstances. Whether it's career, whether it's just life values, I turn my phone off every Friday afternoon for the Sabbath while everyone else is scrambling to finish up the piece set in time. The way I view the world is just a little bit different, and I think that inspires me. But in a very perhaps darker sense and in a practical sense, I think after October 7th, many of us at campuses felt completely powerless, that our friends, our brothers, our cousins, our family in Israel, they were fighting on the front lines. They were risking their lives going into Gaza. I mean, the hostages, they're still there. To think about that is crazy, but they were able to physically fight. They felt empowered. I think if I don't do the bare minimum, that is writing an op-ed or organizing a pro-Israel event on campus or a ceremony in memory of all the people who were killed so ruthlessly, that's to me the bare minimum. So I think I don't know how I would be able to not do it. So the courage, it's almost instinctive, because to me, it's the very least I can do in this situation.
Can I ask you a quick personal question?
Yeah.
Does God play a role in your life? There are so many college students who have been taught to mock people who believe in God. What is your walk with God?
Well, I grew up in a pretty typical modern Orthodox Jewish community, so I'm very lucky that I had a wonderful Jewish education where God and God's commandments to the Jewish people on how to live a life, that was instilled in me from a very, very young age. But in a very practical sense, again, at college, there are assignments I did not submit by the deadline because Sabbath was starting. I have peers that when push came to shove, they submitted the assignment, they kept working on it, and I think that that's my relationship with God, where I can't always understand. Last night, I was hysterically crying when I saw the news about the 6 hostages. I probably still look at it a little bit, but I think even if I can't understand it all, I have to understand that there's a greater purpose and that God is the one behind all of that.
Mm-hmm. Sabrina, where do you get your courage from?
Sure. So what Danielle said totally resonates with me. And I have a similar story. Actually, that 13-year-old girl that you were describing, that was also my story, exactly in the same place. And I asked the same question to the tour guide. And I got the same response. So it's very, very interesting that we share that. But where I get my courage from, so when before entering GW, I also graduated the COVID year, and I took a gap year. I stayed home in San Diego, California, and that time became one of tremendous bonding with my mother. We would walk the streets because there was really nothing else to do, and I listened to stories about her upbringing. She was actually born in Dagestan, which is in southern Russia, and then she moved to Israel and grew up there until she made her way to New York and eventually to San Diego. But long story short, her story was just one of tremendous courage and loyalty to her family, but most of all to herself, and making sure that she could live the best life she wanted to live and discover her values for her happiness. And what I ended up doing is I ended up writing a book about my mom's life story, and through that book, it contains narrative-based tools which I used in my life until the age of 17, which was the time of the publication of the book. So the short answer is really my mom. And expanding from that, my family, my dad's side comes from Egypt, where they were kicked out in the 1950s for being Jewish. And Israel was their safe place of refuge, and eventually they made their way to the United States. So you look at all these families, and there are millions of other families who fled from Russia and Germany and Syria. And if it's not for Israel, if it was not for America, the gratitude that I have for this country is what gives me courage and the inspiration to continue fighting every single day. And it's people like you being here supporting us that makes that courage live on. So I just want to say thank you again for that.
Sabrina, what you said reminds me so much of what my mom felt about the United States. So my mom was born in Morocco. And for Jews almost anywhere around the world, you're known first as the Jew. In America, it's e pluribus unum, from many, one. We are one people. We are one nation under God. This is why America is the beacon of light for the world, right? Which is not what they're teaching you in college, which is why I'm so upset about the colleges. Shabbos, I want to ask you, you can answer where you get your courage from. I know you are also a religious Jew, but I also want to ask you, has this anti-Israel, anti-American, anti-West narrative, is this new? Did you experience this before at Harvard, or did this start with the October 7th invasion of Gaza?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for calling us young. I would also add I'm single, so if you know any nice Jewish girls. So I'll start with a,
This could be a moment,
my God.
y'all. This
Wow.
could be.
Moms for Liberty, you are, thank you, Moms for Liberty.
This could be it. This could be it.
It's the real reason I do this. So look.
The best press we'd ever get, by the way.
So look, the last 10 months in my life have really been remarkable, I think. I've been so privileged and fortunate to be given a speaking platform at the Republican convention. I was invited by the Trump campaign to sit front row as Trump outlined specific policies that would combat the political indoctrination we're seeing in institutions of higher learning in the United States. I've been speaking really across the country to different political organizations, mostly conservative organizations, and I'm not particularly brave, intelligent, or articulate. I like to think I'm funny, but I'm not particularly unique. The reason I just became active is in the Jewish tradition, we have something called the Ethics of Our Fathers, a second-century rabbinic text, Pirkei Avos, and there's a line in there that says, I'll say it in Hebrew, B'makom she'ein anashim hishtadel lios ish, which means in English, in a place where there are no men, strive to be a man. If you find a void, thank you. If there is a void, if there is a lack, try to fill it. Try to be that voice. And what I noticed after October 7th at Harvard University was there was no one standing up for American values. There was no one standing up for truth. And my faith, I am a religious Jew, which means that I don't use the phone or any electronics on the Sabbath. For the first time in my life on October 7th, I broke that. I used my phone on the Sabbath to try to contact my loved ones in Israel to see if they were alive or not. Because two are actually serving in the Israeli Defense Forces right now, and thank God they were okay. But that's not true of all Harvard Jewish students. Many of them lost family and friends. And so I wouldn't call it courage. I would simply just call it what I was taught at a very young age, which is simply strive for truth. And I think that's what all of us are doing here at Moms for Liberty and at this convention. And then in terms of the second question, or I guess it was the first question, which is, where does this come from? So everyone remembers the infamous December 5th congressional testimony where, the three morons in chief, Claudine Gay, Sally Kornblue, and Liz McGill, who, by the way, Liz McGill, the president of Penn, was fired, and Harvard just hired her in their brilliance. So, yeah. So everyone remembers, that testimony, the infamous, it depends on the context. What people don't recall is the House Committee on Education and the Workforce, led by the incredible Virginia Fox, they have held a series of hearings on anti-Semitism, and one of them was a hearing on K through 12. And I thought that was probably the most important one. It was the least attended, it got probably the least amount of media attention. But the indoctrination starts as early as K and even pre-K. First, second, third graders. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. You know more than I. And therefore, there's sort of this term of shocked but not surprised. You have to be shocked when you see American citizens championing the causes of terrorist organizations, championing the murder of American citizens. But at the same time, it's not a surprise because we do see this indoctrination at a very early age. And it's not just political indoctrination against the West, against the United States, but also when it comes to trans ideology, when it comes to things that children should not be learning because it's simply not appropriate. And unfortunately, this perfect storm was really highlighted on October 7th, and we're still in it today.
Thank you. I want to echo what you said and actually show an example because so many times those of us who are in the trenches in this work are being gaslit. And I'm sure that you know exactly what I'm talking about, where they will say that we're making these things up, which is, by the way, why it's so bizarre that I walk around with all these books because I feel like I have to bring all the proof. So a couple of years ago, the NEA, the National Educators Association, one of the largest teachers' unions in America, they have over 2 million subscribers, which many of them have been forced to be members of, published their agenda. And we got a hold of the agenda, and what do you think was their number one issue of business? What do you think was on their mind? This is reading, arithmetic, social justice. Come on, let's get a few more of the ones that you think are obvious. Black Lives Matter, CRT, right? That's what you would expect. The NEA's number one issue of business in 2022 was the Palestinian cause against the Israelis. Number one issue of business. This is way before October 7th. That, by the way, appeared 3 additional times in this same agenda. You probably don't believe me. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Okay? So when we ask whether this issue of anti-Israel is new, it is not. When we ask whether it has to do with Israel's invasion of Gaza, it is not. As many of you know, it all ties in to the same concept of intersectionality, right? It's the hatred of the West. And so sometimes those of us in my community, we say that the Jews are like the Iron Dome of the West. They're the first to absorb those arrows. We are not the last. We are not the last. It is our honor to be the defenders, but we can't do it alone. Because an attack on any religious population in America is an attack on all of us. It is an attack on all Americans. So, with that, one of the other things that I like to talk about is the disappointment of our schools. You happen to be in Ivy League schools, but there are many other colleges that have disappointed us. And my first conversation with every single one of you said the same thing. I bet you're learning more outside of college than in college, because from my perspective, and I'm not big into drinking, but if you spend 4 years inebriated in class, I actually think you'll do just fine these days. So, as very few people emerge from hell empty-handed. I'm sure these calluses are going to make you stronger. What do you feel you've learned from this experience, and how will that contribute to your character, your skill sets, your perseverance, and what you want to do with the rest of your life?
So mine's actually very simple, and over the past year, I have unfortunately come to learn that life is not fair, and that you can't complain about that fact, because it's a fact. The universities will treat ripping down of hostage posters differently than they treat ripping down of any other posters on campus. The university will come after you if you light a candle in your dorm room, but if you're calling for intifada, if you're calling for the erasure of the one Jewish state in the world, that's A-okay. If you want intifada on Princeton's campus, even better. No problems with that. So the first thing I know is that life will not be fair, but you can watch that and lament the fact that it's not fair, or you can actually do something about it. And that's what I've learned at Princeton, is that I've learned a lot in the classroom. I have some wonderful professors, too. It's not all rotten yet. But outside of the classroom, I've also learned that you have to actually take initiative. You have to do it yourself. You have to be gritty. You can't give up, because it's going to get hard. They're going to make it difficult. That's the goal. So you just have to be one step ahead of them all.
Yep.
I would for sure say that toughness is something that I've learned. But just to give the contrast, and I just want you all to get a little bit of flavor of what's going on in our academic institutions. At George Washington University, where I go to school, I don't think I've clarified that yet, last April there was a conference called the Knowledge Production After October 7th, where they brought academics to George Washington University's Elliott School, where they were preaching decolonizing knowledge for resistance practices and reclaiming our academic freedom that has been revoked. So it's not professorship, it's not scholarship, this is activism, which is being used on the SJP Instagram platform, because the next day they were posting knowledge for resistance practices. So this is really going to show the intellectualization, moralization, institutionalization, because the university does nothing about it, and then the normalization of anti-Semitism and anti-Americanism on our campuses. On the flip side of that, what I shared at the beginning about my experience with turning my academic study into really a study of what these ideologies are, and how I could stand up in a classroom, even if I'm alone, and say what's going on campus is not okay. You all are preaching this to my face and calling for the death of me and my family, but I have the bravery and the courage and the grit to stand up and speak for truth, exactly what Shabbos says. It's about speaking for truth and being tough about it. And whatever those people on campus who are shouting whatever kind of slurs think about you, their opinion doesn't matter, because they have no respect for you, and if they have no respect for you, you should have no regard to what they're saying about you. So be tough, keep fighting, and thank you.
So I have an emotional answer, which will lead into a very pragmatic and political answer. So the Harvard-Palestine Solidarity Committee is the largest compilation of intellectually challenged individuals I've ever met in my life. I'll just give you a laundry list of incidents that have happened in the last 10 months at Harvard University alone. We've had a Jewish student being spat on for wearing a kippah. We had an Israeli student at the Harvard Business School being physically assaulted. We had, I'm not making this up, an Israeli student being told by her professor to leave the class because her nationality made other people uncomfortable. We had a staff member who vandalized all of our hostage posters, calling attention to the fact that there are 8 American hostages in Gaza. He vandalized all of our posters, challenged me to debate him in a secluded underpass as to whether Jews were behind 9/11, and then threatened me with a machete. I had that private armed security outside my house for a week. There was a guy with a gun who followed me to make sure I was okay when I went to the Sabbath prayers. Harvard University purports to train the next generation of American leaders, thought leaders, politicians. It's not an exaggeration to state that statistically speaking, I probably sat in a classroom with a future president. If these are the future leaders of our country, then I hope you can now understand it's not a Jewish issue. An issue that concerns each and every one of us. Yeah. And that leads me into the more pragmatic political answer. I'm probably the first person on a Moms for Liberty panel to ever say that I'm a registered Democrat. Hold your booze. But but while it is true that in the past I marched for Black Lives Matter, I marched at the Supreme Court when they overturned Roe v. Wade, it is objectively the case that my progressive comrades, the ideological allies that I have been seeped in for most of my young adult life, have totally abandoned the Jewish people and have totally abandoned the American people. I will be at the Republican Jewish Coalition Conference, maybe I'll see you there actually, on Wednesday, and I'll be endorsing Trump. And that's something I never... And that's something I never thought I would say. I've only voted for Democrats in the past. But when we as a country are faced with an existential crisis, when we are faced with what are our values, what is truth, what is objective morality, then I think there's only one answer, and I'm not alone. There are many, many young Jewish and young American progressives who've woken up to this.
So let me end with this. As Glenn said yesterday, and many of us here share the same message, with arms wide open, welcome, welcome. And we hope to see more students follow you. We hope to see more of them. Friends, fighting evil is fun. Fight, fight, fight.